So the last two problems on day 72 notes are review of factoring and review of the quadratic formula. So I'm going to guess, after seeing factoring, quadratic formula, and taking square roots, you're probably thinking, hey, I like equations that factor. I know that I like equations that factor. So when we get a little further in, we won't necessarily be told what method to use. So I always check to see if something factors because I do think it's the easiest method. But we know number 7 is factoring because it tells us. So we look at our a. If you remember, we always look at what's in front of the x squared term. It's a 1. So for this one, we get to go straight to the diamond problem. Negative 12, remember that our constant goes in the top. Negative 1, the coefficient on the x term goes in the bottom. And we need two numbers that multiply to negative 12, but add to negative 1. Well, since they multiply to be negative, one's going to be negative and one's going to be positive. And here it's going to be negative 4 and positive 3. So we bring those over and write our factors. X minus 4, x plus 3. But just like we talked about on day 70, we're not just factoring, we're solving. So we're going to use that zero product property and set each factor equal to 0. So x minus 4 could equal 0, or x plus 3 could equal 0. Those are not hard equations. We get x equals 4, or x equals negative 3. So factoring, in my personal opinion, is one of the simpler methods for solving a quadratic. However, not every quadratic factors, which is why we do have the quadratic formula and another method called completing the square, which you will learn about in Algebra 2. So we are going to have a quiz next class period or next day that our class would meet. It's going to have factoring and it's also going to have quadratic formula. So let's not forget how to do that. Our quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So that's what we're going to use. We need our quadratic in standard form equal to 0. Number 8's already set up that way. And like we talked about the other day, I do suggest that you write out what is A, what is B, and what is C. A lot of times that will make it easier for you to know what you're plugging in. It will also hopefully make you or lead you to have less mistakes in your signs. So now it's a giant plug and chug problem. Negative b, well, negative 12 is positive 12 plus or minus the square root of b squared. Negative 12 times negative 12 is 144. And it's minus 4 times a, which is 5, times c, which is 7. All over 2a, which is 10. I'm going to type everything that's in this square root in my calculator. I'm going to do 144 minus, and then in parentheses, I'm going to write 4 times 5 times 7. When I type that in my calculator, 144 minus 4 times 5 times 7, these are all in one set of parentheses, I get 4. Because 4 times 5 times 7 is 140, 144 minus 140 is 4. So the reason that the quadratic formula is a little cumbersome is that you've just got to keep track of all your pieces until you get to the end. Well, now we've got the square root of 4. This is a much nicer problem than the ones we did the other day because the square root of 4 is 2. So we get 12 plus or minus 2 over 10. Well, up above in the new problems for today, I said you could leave the plus or minus in there. And sometimes for quadratic formula you can when you don't have a nice simplified radical. This we can deal with. So this means we're going to have 12 plus 2 over 10 And we're going to have 12 minus 2 over 10. So we're going to have both of those things happening because that's what this plus or minus means. Well, 12 plus 2, again, technical difficulties. So finishing up problem 8, 12 plus 2 is 14. 14 over 10, that fraction reduces to 7 over 5. And I will leave that as 7 over 5. If you type this in your calculator, you will get 1.4. I can live with that decimal, but I personally am not going to do that. I like fractions. 12 minus 2 is 10. So 10 over 10 is 1. So your two solutions for number 8 are 7/5 or 1.4 and 1. So quadratic formula always works, which makes it a great tool, but it is very cumbersome. So you have to be very careful about how you plug your numbers in and be very careful about how you use your calculator to simplify your answers. So we've talked about factoring, we've talked about quadratic formula, and we've talked about taking square roots, all as methods for solving quadratics. We are going to have a quiz on Thursday or on our next class, depending whether you're purple or white. So you need to make sure that you've watched the videos and done the practice problems for all 3 of our lessons, day 70, day 71, and day 72, because we do have a quiz coming up. Also, make sure you're checking the gradebook. I've been updating that. There's a lot of you that are owing me missing things. Please, please get those turned in or let me know what's going on so that we can figure out how to get your work turned in. Thank you. Study hard, babies.